One of the weirdest places on the surface of old Mother Earth lies in the northwest corner of the state of Utah. Tens of thousands of years ago, all this was a landlocked sea, 1,000 feet deep and the size of Lake Michigan. All that remains today is the Great Salt Lake. Surrounding Salt Lake is a sprawling expanse of deposited salts. 3,000 miles of white wilderness form an area 1/3 larger than the entire state of Delaware, 120 miles west of Salt Lake City. These salt beds spread across 200 square miles of moonscape, the Bonneville Salt Flats. The standing water of winter rain and snow vanishes each summer and levels the surface, making it flat and hard. No wildlife exists, and the only signs of man's presence are a railroad, a ribbon of highway, and evaporation ponds where chemicals are collected for commercial use. A wild land, dangerous, strangely brutal, an ideal backdrop for man's unending efforts in pursuit of speed. Sir Malcolm Campbell brought this Rolls-Royce-powered monster to Bonneville and became the first man to break the magic 300-mile-an-hour mark. Pursuit of the world land speed record has been underway since 1898, when Count Chazeloup-Labat whistled through the traps at 39 kilos an hour. Another Britisher, George Easton, took the record from Campbell in 1937 with this absolute stunner of a car powered with not one, but 2 Rolls-Royce aircraft engines. His mark, set by the required 2-way run through the electric timing trap, was 312 miles an hour, and the Union Jack continued to reign supreme on the blazing white salt. In 1904, Henry Ford himself held the world speed record when he sped across the frozen surface of a Michigan lake at 91 miles an hour. The site for world speed record attempts shifted to Daytona Beach, Florida in the early 1900s, and Sig Heyerdahl, 6-time dirt track champion, crashed trying at Daytona Beach. But he never made it into the hallowed record book of the fastest men in motoring history. In 1927, the Italian racer Foresti crashed his straight-eight Yelmo in a tragic record attempt at Pendine Sands, which was England's counterpart of Daytona. Frank Lockhart, an American folk hero of his time, drove to his death at Daytona the very next year on April 15th in pursuit of the record he never was able to capture. In 1927 and again in 1929, Sir Henry Seagrave, who left his name on half the fire engines of the world, joined the battle for the unlimited land speed record. His best run was 231 miles an hour in this Sunbeam racer, powered with 2 Matabele aircraft engines. He remained locked in furious battle for the record with his countryman Malcolm Campbell, who took the record back in this run at Daytona in 1932. Seagrave abandoned the chase after 1929. Meanwhile, a young Salt Lake City resident, Ab Jenkins, was making his own kind of American-style history on the Bonneville Salt Course. Jenkins specialized in endurance runs on a sweeping circle smoothed into the salt, and he spent a lifetime making speed history with a succession of cars he called Mormon Meteors. He drove Auburns, Duesenbergs, Pierce Arrows, and a score of other passenger cars in a series of successful record attempts at varying distances on the Bonneville course. Although his name appears in the official record books a score of times, he never held the absolute world land speed record. But if ever a man truly chased the wind, that man was Ab Jenkins. A whole new breed of man began coming to the Salt Flats in the late 1930s. He was the American hot rodder who modified stock bodies and hopped up passenger car engines. He financed himself with money earned at odd jobs and built his cars in backyards. These homemade speedsters were suddenly going faster than the finest cars designed for the millionaire nobleman who previously held a total lock on the super dangerous pursuit of speed records. So the hot rodder came to Bonneville, not with an army of mechanics and costly equipment, but often with his wife and baby and a friend or two to engage in his own pursuit of the wind. The essential item in all speed runs is accurate timing, and at Bonneville, that job is done by the U.S. Auto Club, which brings expensive electronic gear to the Salt to ensure that records are accepted by the World Auto Record Governing Body. In charge of all of this was Joe Petrelli, who ruled the Bonneville Salt like a king. Joe, many times a national champion motorcycle rider, began to direct the Bonneville timing force with Art Pillsbury, who ran the old American Automobile Club with an iron hand before it gave way to the U.S. Auto Club. And Joe Petrelli, for years the grand old man of the Salt Flats, was chief counsel and earnest advisor to every man and woman who came to the Salt Flats to gamble life and limb against the opportunity to achieve undying fame. Petrelli died of a heart attack late in 1973, working at the job he loved so well. Mickey Thompson began building speed record cars that were destined to rewrite history. In 1960, just 10 years after his first visit to the Salt Flats, Thompson, in a streamliner powered with 4 hopped-up Pontiac passenger car engines, screamed down the course one way at 406 miles an hour, faster than John Cobb. But he couldn't make it back on the return run needed to establish a record. A critical shaft broke, and Mickey Thompson never joined the magic ranks of the men who held the absolute land speed record. During this time, another hot rodder materialized on the Bonneville Salt Flats with a story as weird as the landscape. He was Athol Graham, who said he had a vision when he was serving as a Mormon missionary. Graham believed it was a divine command to build a car to take the land speed record from Britain's John Cobb. With a car built out of old truck parts and a war surplus aircraft engine, he joined the chase for the magical 400-mile-an-hour mark. But the built-in problems of his underfinanced homemade streamliner finally caught up with him, and he found death instead of fame on the blinding white salt at Bonneville. Graham's widow rebuilt the car and asked Otto Ansjohn to try it. It crashed again, but Ansjohn was unhurt. Donald Campbell, boat racing's son of Sir Malcolm, had crashed in a wheel-driven turbine car at Bonneville in 1960 during a futile try to beat the record of his countryman John Cobb. Then he topped the 400 mark at Lake Eyre in Australia in 1964, only to die in a boat crash 3 years later. Another facet of Bonneville's history is the use of this fast race course as a proving ground for automobiles and auto aftermarket products. Here at Bonneville in the middle 1950s, a crew of brilliant race drivers, including the now venerable Captain Easton, the late road racer Ken Miles, drivers like Harold Shelby and Donald Healy, went to Bonneville with a fleet of British Motor Corporation passenger cars, plus a streamliner with several different engines. They drove the 10-mile circle course, and they drove the straightaway land speed record course. Finally, they all went back to England with a whole book full of records, which they used to sell their little sports cars around the world. And they gave some big ideas to another group of people who would add even more luster to the annals of Bonneville. The first of these was Andy Granatelli. Andy trained two pretty girl drivers to be part of his team, Paula Murphy and Barbara Neeland. They were the first distaff racers ever to appear on the Salt Flats. Their names are still in the Bonneville record books, along with those of Andy Granatelli and his brothers Joe and Vince. Andy, who already had a great reputation as a hot rodder and Indianapolis car builder, put together a whole fleet of Studebaker passenger cars to stage two massive assaults on the record books. What they did in addition was to lead the way for Bonneville speed and endurance promotions that were later employed by Ford, American Motors, and more than a dozen major suppliers in the auto field. Andy also used these Bonneville record runs to test a then new product of the Studebaker auto family, STP oil treatment. Earlier, STP had been the sole sponsor of Athol Graham's ill-fated Streamliner. This time, STP's public exposure at Bonneville was the very first step of a worldwide plan to make the STP trademark into a household word. Before the Granatelli Studebaker team had finished on the Salt Flats, they owned 404 new speed and endurance records. Out of a fleet of 35 new stock cars, which they raced in various classes and over various distances, they suffered not a single mechanical failure in two different month-long assaults on the record books. During the 10-year period that followed the Granatelli brothers' assault on the record books, Bonneville Salt Flats became more widely known to the motoring public than the test tracks of Detroit. But the auto industry people weren't in search of the absolute land speed record. The inability of anyone to break old John Cobb's record with a piston engine of either auto or aircraft origin led daring new car builders to try the aircraft jet engine. Dr. Nathan Ostich, a Los Angeles physician, was the pioneer in this move with a surplus jet engine installed in a car designed by Hot Rod magazine publisher Ray Brock. The Doc Ostich effort was noteworthy and added much to the lore of the new jet-powered racers. But despite a succession of wild rides down the land speed course, which put a lot of new gray hairs in the good doctor's head, neither Ostich nor Brock were able to enter their names on the elite list of world land speed record holders. Next came Glenn Lesher with a jet dragster modified by Romeo Palomides. But on his first run, at about 250 miles an hour, the big jet yawed, rolled on its side, and exploded. Lesher died in the crash. By 1962, it began to look like John Cobb's old pre-war record would stand forever. Then out of a poverty background came young, handsome Craig Breedlove. The peculiar tricycle design of his dream car dated back to his childhood. Craig's dream came true in 1963 when he fired the engine of his Spirit of America at Bonneville. The car ran straight and true. He ran 388 miles an hour on his first try and scalded back on the return run at 428 miles an hour. He had a two-way average of 407, and that broke John Cobb's old mark of 394. But a bitter pill awaited Breedlove. The FIA, which recognizes speed marks, said Spirit didn't qualify on two counts. First, it was a tricycle, and thus was classified as a motorcycle. And second, it did not have power connected to the wheels, so technically Cobb still owned the record. The whole thing became academic in a few weeks when Art Arfons took another jet and bumped the record to 434 miles an hour. Breedlove promptly went back to the Salt, pushed the record to 468 miles an hour, and prepared to shoot for 500.
He's on course, looking good.
Things seemed to be going butter smooth when problems suddenly developed as Craig hurtled down the Salt at 550 miles an hour. Totally out of control. control, with both parachutes pulled off by the fierce thrust of power, Breedlove's car traveled in a wide arc, snapped off a telephone pole, and plunged nose first into a drainage ditch.
For my next trick! You didn't make it. I'll set myself afire.
In shock after the crash, Breedlove learned he was undisputed speed king of the world again, with a record of 526 miles an hour. Who cared what the FIA said about jets and tricycles? What had suddenly developed was a duel mano-a-mano, as the bullfighters say, for the unlimited land speed record. Walt Arfons, brother of Art, had what he thought was a better idea. He built a tricycle streamliner, put a thick firewall behind the driver, and loaded the tail with a frightful stinger of Jato bottles. The idea made for interesting photography and neck-snapping acceleration for the driver, brave Bob Tatro. But it didn't approach the speeds at which Art Arfons, Walt's half-brother, and Craig Breedlove were dueling for, the absolute ownership of the land speed record. Walt Arfons briefly tried this jet car. The pressure on car builders, drivers, and the sponsoring rival tire companies was fantastic. In just over 2 years, the speeds had soared from 350 to 400 to 500 and were climbing towards 600. Walt remained enthusiastic about rockets. He came back with this rebuilt car, with even more rockets slung in special ports along both sides. The operating cost was fantastic. The Jato rocket bottles cost $1,000 each. It took 25 to go each way on the salt, so each attempt cost $50,000 to fuel. If it wasn't the fastest, it was certainly the most expensive land speed attempt in history from a fuel standpoint. The absolute top speed of the new car proved to be 510 miles an hour, and the best one-way trip through the traps was timed at 475. Besides, the rockets burned away the metal from the flanks of the hottest car in land speed record history. With everything else that was blossoming on the Bonneville Salt, women drivers appeared in force on the salt flats. Andy Granatelli of STP teamed with Art Arfons to bring pretty Betty Skelton, aviatrix and stock car driver, up from Detroit to set a new women's land speed record. Then Andy engaged Paula Murphy to drive a drag strip jet owned by Walt Arfons. Conditions were wet, and Paula had never even seen a jet car before, but she put together a two-way average of 226 miles an hour and admitted she nearly scared herself to death in the process. The women's record finally fell to Lee Breedlove, who steered Spirit of America down the course at a speed of 308 miles per hour. But meanwhile, the Breedlove-Arfons duel was getting furious. In November of 1966, Art took his green monster jet through the traps at 589 miles an hour with a terminal speed of 615. Then a front wheel collapsed. That he survived the crash was a miracle, but he suffered not a single broken bone or serious scratch. It was to be his last attempt. That duel was over at long last. In the commotion of the war between the jets, there had been action on another front. Bill and Bob Summers, American hot rodders, were determined to take the wheel-powered record away from Donald Campbell. They stuffed 4 Chrysler passenger car engines into this slender needle of a car they called Goldenrod. After a full year of tribulations which nearly bankrupted them, Bob Summers sent the little needle car through the traps for a two-way average of 409 miles an hour. At long last, the official land speed record for wheel-driven cars was back in the United States. All this business left Orphans in possession of the unlimited jet-powered land speed record, and it was up to Craig Breedlove to get it back. He saddled up his jet car after being delayed into November of 1965. This was a new machine called Sonic 1, and now had 4 wheels and a Coke bottle shape. Craig reckoned it could easily top 600 miles an hour, and he was hot to run. The new Sonic 1 was behaving like it was supposed to. There was no longer any trace of a steering problem. Craig put together 2 relatively routine runs, one at 593 and the other at 608 miles an hour, for a new record of 600.601 miles an hour. That topped the magic 600 mark and put his competitors right up against the sonic barrier. Next came Gary Gabelich, another hot rodder, destined to wrest the land speed record from Breedlove, who has held it now for 5 long years. Gabelich, son of a Mexican mother and a Yugoslav father, had been on the salt for more than a month, overcoming a series of frustrating problems with a car powered by a rocket engine, fueled with hydrogen peroxide and liquefied natural gas. He says he communicates with his silver blue missile called Blue Flame. This will be the hottest run yet in his finally perfected rocket car. Joe Petrelli looks at history in the making. The speed for this run is well over Breedlove's record, 617 miles an hour. Now, after a quick turnaround, Gabelich has it all on the line. His cockpit, because of the car's novel design, is ghostly quiet. His gauges show a terminal speed of 655 miles an hour. In the stillness of his cockpit, he knows he owns a new speed record. His second run averaged 627, and his two-way average stands at 622 miles an hour. He touched the edges of the sonic barrier on this last smooth run. It was the 19th time that Gabelich had chased the wind down the Bonneville course, and it happened October 23rd, 1970. His name was the 31st to go into the great book of land speed records. The man who beats him will face the dread sonic barrier. Man's conquest of space, his travels to the moon, none of these have dimmed his desire to be the fastest man on wheels. He will always chase the wind.